My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I never thought my 33rd birthday would become the day I finally saw my family for what they truly were. The smell of apple pie filled the air in my childhood home, mixing with the scent of fresh flowers and the familiar mustiness of old wooden floors. Red, white, and blue decorations hung from every corner of the living room where I grew up, the same decorations my mother used for every family celebration. My heart was beating fast with excitement as I walked into the room full of relatives and friends. After working double shifts at the hospital all week, I was ready to celebrate with the people who mattered most to me. My husband Jake squeezed my hand, his calloused fingers still smelling like motor oil from the garage where he spent his days, fixing cars. He smiled at me with those warm brown eyes that made me fall in love with him 8 years ago. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he whispered in my ear, making me feel like the luckiest woman alive. But that feeling was about to shatter into a million pieces. My mother stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of wine and wearing that perfect smile she always saved for public occasions. Her gray hair was styled exactly the way she liked it, not a strand out of place. She looked elegant in her blue dress, the kind of woman who commanded attention without even trying. "Everyone, please gather around," she called out in her clear, authoritative voice. "I want to say something about my daughter on her special day." My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. This was it. Finally, the public recognition I had been waiting for my entire life. Finally, my mother was going to say something kind about me in front of everyone. I could feel my palms getting sweaty as I watched her face, searching for any hint of the warmth I desperately craved. The room fell silent. Aunt Margaret put down her plate of cake. Uncle Bob stopped mid-conversation. My younger sister Emma and her husband stood near the window, their expensive clothes making them look like they belonged in a magazine. Everyone's eyes were on my mother, waiting for her words. "You know," my mother began, her voice carrying across the room with perfect clarity, "Sarah has always been so different from Emma, so ungrateful for everything this family has given her." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The happy chatter that had filled the room just seconds before died completely. I could hear the tick of the old grandfather clock in the corner, each second stretching into eternity. "While Emma has always appreciated what she has and made something of herself," my mother continued, looking directly at my sister with pride glowing in her eyes, "Sarah has always been, well, you can see for yourselves. She chose to marry a mechanic instead of someone who could provide stability." My face burned with shame and anger. I felt Jake's hand tighten around mine, his body going rigid beside me. The taste in my mouth turned bitter, like I had been chewing on metal. Every eye in the room was on me now, some filled with pity, others with uncomfortable curiosity. "Mom," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But she wasn't finished. "I've tried to understand her choices," she said, shaking her head sadly. "But sometimes you just have to accept that not all children turn out the way you hope they will." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to press them against my sides. The familiar living room suddenly felt like a courtroom where I had just been found guilty of some crime I didn't even know I had committed. Aunt Margaret cleared her throat uncomfortably. Someone dropped a fork, and the clattering sound seemed to echo forever. My cousin David stared at his shoes like they were the most interesting things in the world. But what hurt most was seeing Emma's face. She wasn't shocked or horrified by our mother's words. Instead, she looked relieved, like she had been waiting for this moment, for this public confirmation of what we both already knew, that she was the favored daughter, and I was the disappointment. "Well," Jake said suddenly, his voice cutting through the terrible silence. His arm moved around my waist, pulling me close to his side. "I think it's time we headed home." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. All I could do was nod and let him guide me toward the door. As we passed the table where my birthday cake sat with its bright candles still burning, I felt tears starting to sting my eyes. "Sarah!" my mother called after me, her voice now softer but still carrying that edge of disappointment I knew so well. "Don't be so dramatic. You know I didn't mean anything hurtful." I stopped walking. Something inside me snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight. I turned around slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in the room watching me. My mother stood there with that same perfect smile, as if she hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about. "You meant every word," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And for the first time in my life, I finally heard you clearly." The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of Jake's truck engine and my occasional sniffles. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I kept replaying my mother's words over and over in my mind. Ungrateful. Different from Emma. Not what she hoped for. When we pulled into our driveway, Jake turned off the engine and sat there for a moment without speaking. Our small house looked cozy and welcoming with its yellow porch light and the flowers I had planted last spring. It wasn't fancy like Emma's house with its big windows and perfect lawn, but it was ours. "Sarah," Jake said finally, his voice gentle, but firm. "What happened back there, that wasn't okay." I nodded, feeling fresh tears starting to fall. "I know, but it's nothing new, Jake. This is how she's always been. I guess I always hoped she would change." He reached over and took my hand in both of his. "Honey, you are the most grateful person I know. You say thank you when I hand you a cup of coffee in the morning. You send thank you notes for Christmas gifts. You volunteer at the hospital on your days off because you're grateful to be able to help people." His words made me cry harder, but this time it wasn't just from hurt. It was from relief that someone finally saw me for who I really was. "And as for me being just a mechanic," he continued, his voice getting stronger, "I may not wear expensive suits like Emma's husband, but I work with my hands every day to build a life with the woman I love. That's worth more than any fancy job, title." I squeezed his hands, feeling some of the pain in my chest start to ease. "I love you, Jake Mitchell." "I love you too, Sarah Mitchell," he said, leaning over to kiss my forehead. "And tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to handle this. Because what happened tonight, we can't let it happen again." As we walked up to our front door, I felt something shifting inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and real. But underneath it was something else. Something that felt like determination. My mother had finally shown everyone exactly who she was, and more importantly, she had shown me who I needed to become. The old Sarah would have spent the next week crying and making excuses for her mother's behavior. But standing there on my front porch, with my husband's arm around me and the taste of humiliation still bitter in my mouth, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the grateful daughter who accepted crumbs of affection. I was done making myself smaller to make my mother feel bigger. And I was definitely done pretending that what happened tonight was normal or acceptable. Whatever came next, I was going to face it with my eyes wide open and my spine straight. Because for the first time in my 33 years of life, I was finally ready to fight back. The smell of disinfectant and the steady beeping of monitors couldn't distract me from what happened at my birthday party. 3 days had passed, but my mother's words still echoed in my head every time I tried to focus on my patients at the Y hospital. My hands shook as I checked Mrs. Peterson's IV, and she noticed immediately. "Honey, you look like you haven't slept in days," she said, her wrinkled hand patting mine gently. "What's troubling you?" I forced a smile, the same fake one I had been using my whole life. "Just tired, Mrs. Peterson. Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix." But sleep wasn't fixing anything. Every night I lay awake thinking about my mother's face when she called me ungrateful. The way she looked at Emma with such pride while describing me like I was some kind of failure. Jake kept telling me I was overthinking it, but something deep in my gut told me this was bigger than one bad moment. When my shift ended, I drove to my parents' house. My mother had called twice, leaving voicemails about clearing the air and not taking things so personally. Her voice sounded sweet and concerned, like she always did when she wanted to smooth things over without actually apologizing. I found her in the kitchen, making her famous chicken casserole. The same casserole she had been making for Sunday dinners since I was a little girl. She looked up when I walked in, her face brightening with that practiced smile. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came by. I was hoping we could talk about the other night. I think you misunderstood what I was trying to say." My stomach twisted. Here it came, the explanation that would make me feel crazy for being hurt in the first place. "Mom, you called me ungrateful in front of everyone. You compared me to Emma and made it sound like I was a disappointment. What exactly did I misunderstand?" She sighed and wiped her hands on her apron, the same blue one with tiny flowers, that she had worn for as long as I could remember. "Sweetheart, you've always been so sensitive. I was just trying to motivate you. Emma has done so well for herself, the big house, the successful husband. I want that kind of security for you too." The words felt like tiny needles under my skin. "I am secure, Mom. I have a job I love, a husband who adores me, and a home that makes me happy." "Why isn't that enough?" "Because you could have so much more," she said, her voice getting sharper. "Look at Emma. She married someone who can provide for her properly. She doesn't have to work double shifts to make ends meet. She has nice things, Sarah, a beautiful home, vacations, a future." I stared at her, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "And you think Jake can't provide for me properly? I think you settled," she said simply. "And I think deep down you know it too." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too hot. I could smell the casserole cooking, mixed with the lemon-scented cleaner she always used on the counters. These familiar smells that used to comfort me now made me feel sick. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, walking away before she could respond. As I climbed the stairs to the upstairs bathroom, I heard her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. The sound stopped, then started again. When I came back down, she was standing by the window, completely absorbed in typing a message. "Mom," I called. "Just a minute, honey," she said without looking up. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, and I could see the satisfied smile on her face as she typed. That's when I noticed she had left the phone face up on the counter when she moved to stir the casserole. The screen was still lit, showing her conversation with someone named Linda Garden Club. My heart started beating faster as I read the visible text. "You should see Emma's new photos from their vacation to Italy. Meanwhile, Sarah is still married to that mechanic. Some children just don't have the same drive." The blood rushed from my face. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting under my feet. My mother was texting about me right now, while I was standing in her kitchen trying to have an honest conversation about my hurt feelings. "Sarah, are you all right?" My mother's voice seemed to come from very far away. I looked up at her, this woman who had raised me, who was supposed to love me unconditionally. "Who's Linda from Garden Club?" Her eyes flickered to her phone, then back to me. "Oh, just a friend. We share photos of our gardens and family updates." "Family updates," I repeated slowly. "About me and Emma?" She moved quickly to grab her phone, but I had already seen enough. The timestamp showed she had been texting about me and Jake just moments before I arrived, while she was preparing to tell me how sensitive I was being. "Sarah, you're being paranoid. It was just casual conversation." But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing, connecting dots I had never wanted to see before. How many times had she done this? How many conversations with her friends involved? Putting me down while praising Emma? How many people in our small town had heard about my disappointing life choices? "I have to go," I said, grabbing my purse. "Sarah, wait. You're overreacting again. This is exactly what I mean about being too sensitive." I stopped at the kitchen door and turned back to look at her. She stood there in her perfect kitchen with her perfect apron, looking frustrated that I wasn't accepting her explanation like I always had before. "Mom, I'm not overreacting. I'm finally reacting appropriately." The drive home felt like waking up from a long dream. Everything looked the same streets I had driven down my whole life, the same houses with their neat lawns and American flags. But something fundamental had shifted in how I saw it all. When I got home, Jake was in the garage working on an old Ford. He looked up when he heard my car, his face immediately showing concern when he saw my expression. "What happened?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I told him everything, about the phone conversation, about what my mother said about him, about the sick feeling in my stomach that this was just the tip of the iceberg. "Sarah," he said carefully, "how long do you think this has been going on?" That was the question I had been afraid to ask myself. "I don't know. Maybe always?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with anger. "What do you want to do about it?" I looked at him. This man who worked with his hands, who came home dirty but proud every day, who loved me exactly as I was. And I made a decision that scared me. I want to find out exactly what she's been saying about us. And then I want to decide what to do with that information. The look in Jake's eyes told me he understood this wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about discovering the truth of how I had been treated my entire life, and maybe finally doing something about it. The video started playing and my heart stopped beating. 25 years of my parents' marriage flickered across the screen. Their wedding, holidays, birthdays, family vacations. Emma appeared constantly. Emma as a baby, Emma's first steps, Emma's graduation, Emma's wedding. Photo after photo of my sister living her perfect life. I waited for my pictures to show up. I kept waiting. 3 photos. In 15 minutes of family history, I appeared in exactly 3 photos. 2 as a small child standing behind Emma. 1 from my high school graduation where I was barely visible behind a cousin. My wedding day. Missing. My nursing school graduation. Gone. 8 years of marriage to Jake, completely erased from my family's story. But Emma's entire life was there in vivid detail, celebrated and preserved for everyone to see. The room filled with compliments about what a beautiful family my parents had built. Several relatives praised Emma's achievements. No one mentioned that I had basically been deleted from 25 years of memories. When the lights came back on, I felt invisible. Actually invisible, like I was fading away in real time. "That was lovely," Aunt Carol said to my mother. "You can really see how proud you are of your daughters." "Oh yes," my mother replied with a bright smile. "Emma has given us so much to be proud of." Emma. Not daughters, just Emma. I excused myself to the bathroom and sat there trying to breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my knees. 3 photos. In my own family's history, I barely existed. When I came back downstairs, I found Aunt Margaret washing dishes alone in the kitchen. "Aunt Margaret," I said, my voice barely steady, "has Mom ever talked to you about me and Jake?" Her hands stopped moving in the soapy water. She looked uncomfortable, like I had asked something she didn't want to answer. "Sarah, you know your mother loves you." "That's not what I asked." She sighed and turned to face me. "Your mother worries about you. She thinks you could have done better for yourself." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Better how?" "She thinks you settled. That you married Jake too young. She's mentioned it a few times over the years." My throat closed up. "What else has she said?" Aunt Margaret glanced toward the doorway, making sure we were alone. "She's concerned that you don't seem ambitious enough, that you're content with simple when you could have had more." "How often does she bring this up?" The question hung in the air between us. Aunt Margaret looked like she wanted to disappear. "Please," I whispered. "I need to know." "Every time we talk, Sarah, every single time, she finds a way to compare you to Emma or worry about your choices. It's been going on for years." The kitchen floor tilted under my feet. Every time they talked, for years. My life was such a regular source of disappointment for my mother that discussing it had become routine conversation with other family members. I walked back to the living room in a daze. My parents were saying goodbye to guests. Emma and David were getting ready to leave, and my mother hugged them like they were the most precious people in the world. "Thank you both for coming," she gushed. "Emma, that flower arrangement made the whole room perfect." Then she turned to me and Jake with a polite smile. "Thank you for the photo album. It was thoughtful. Thoughtful. Not beautiful or meaningful. Just thoughtful. The word you use when someone gives you something you don't actually want." In the car, Jake was quiet until we reached the first stoplight. "3 photos," he said. "I know. And your aunt said your mother discusses us every time they talk." "I know." His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Sarah, this isn't normal family problems. This is systematic." I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my childhood, seeing them differently now. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever feel the same again. "What are you saying, Jake?" "I'm saying your mother has been running a campaign against you for years, and I think we need to find out exactly how far it goes." Standing in our driveway a few minutes later, I realized he was right. This wasn't about hurt feelings or misunderstandings anymore. This was about discovering the full truth of how I had been erased from my own family story, and I was finally ready to dig deeper, no matter how much it hurt. The sound of Emma crying on my front porch at 7 in the morning was not something I ever expected to hear. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her face. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had stood in my parents' living room 3 days ago, accepting praise for her expensive flower arrangement. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaking. "Can I come in?" I opened the door wider, my heart racing. Emma never came to my house. In 8 years of marriage, she had been inside exactly twice, once for a Christmas party, and once when she needed to borrow something. Now she stood in my living room looking around like she had never seen it before. "David lost everything," she said, collapsing onto my couch. "The investment deal he was so excited about, it was a scam. We're going to lose the house, Sarah. Maybe even declare bankruptcy." I sat down across from her, trying to process this information. David, the successful businessman my mother constantly praised. David, who made Emma's life so perfect that it was used as a weapon against mine. David, who was supposed to represent everything Jake wasn't. "I'm sorry, Emma. That must be terrifying." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "But that's not why I'm here. I came because I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." My stomach clenched. The way she said it made me think I didn't want to hear whatever was coming next. "I know, Sarah. I've always known how Mom treats you differently, how she talks about you to other people, how she compares us constantly." Emma's voice broke on the last word. "And I never said anything to stop it." The room went completely quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I stared at my sister, this woman I had grown up with, shared a bathroom with, fought over toys with, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "You knew," I said slowly. "You knew, and you never said anything." "I was scared," she whispered. "I was scared that if I defended you, she would start treating me the way she treated you. So I just let it happen. I let her praise me while she tore you down, and I told myself it wasn't really that bad." My hands started shaking. I pressed them against my knees to make them stop, but the trembling spread up my arms and into my chest. How long have you known? Since we were teenagers. Maybe longer. Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup even more. Do you remember when you got into nursing school? You were so excited. And when you called to tell Mom, I was standing right there in the kitchen with her. I remembered. I had been so proud, so happy. I had expected my mother to be thrilled that her daughter was going to help people, save lives, make a difference. After you hung up, Mom turned to me and said, "Well, at least she found something she can handle. Not everyone is cut out for bigger. Things like you are, Emma." My sister's voice got smaller with each word. She said it like nursing was some kind of consolation prize. The memory hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had called back an hour later because my mother's response had seemed so lukewarm, so disappointed. When I asked if she was proud of me, she had said, "Of course, sweetheart. I'm proud that you found your calling. Your calling. Not proud of my achievement, not excited about my future. Proud that I had found something suitable for someone like me." "What else?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma looked at her hands. She has a group chat with her friends from the garden club. They share photos and updates about their children. She posts pictures of me and David constantly. Our house, our vacations, my achievements. "But Sarah?" She stopped talking, like the words were too painful to say. "But what?" "She never mentions you. Ever. When Linda asked about you once because she remembered you from high school, Mom said you were still figuring things out and changed the subject to me. I felt like I was drowning. The air in my living room seemed too thick to breathe." My own mother had been systematically erasing me from conversations with her friends for years. While she celebrated Emma's life in detail, I didn't even exist in her version of our family. "There's more," Emma said, and I wanted to tell her to stop. I couldn't handle any more revelations. But she kept talking. "Last month, when David and I went over for dinner, I left my phone in the kitchen when I went to the bathroom. Mom picked it up and started looking through my photos. She found the ones from your birthday party, the ones Jake posted on Facebook." My heart stopped. "What did she say?" "She deleted them, Sarah. She deleted the photos of you and Jake from my phone and said, 'Emma, you don't need these cluttering up your memory. You have much prettier pictures to keep.'" Emma was crying harder now. I should have stopped her. I should have said something. But I just let her do it. The betrayal cut deeper than anything my mother had done. Emma, my own sister, had watched our mother delete photos of me and said nothing. Had participated in my erasure from our family's story. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because losing everything made me realize what really matters. And because I'm ashamed, Sarah. I'm so ashamed of who I've been, of how I've treated you." She looked up at me with desperate eyes. "I know you probably hate me." I studied her face. The same face I had grown up looking at across the dinner table, the same eyes that had watched me get hurt over and over without saying a word. I waited to feel anger, rage, the desire to throw her out of my house. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Relief that I hadn't been crazy all these years. Relief that someone else had finally seen what I had been living with. "I don't hate you, Emma," I said. "But I need to understand something. All those times you smiled when Mom praised you and put me down. Did you enjoy it?" She flinched like I had slapped her. "Sometimes," she whispered. "Sometimes it felt good to be the favorite. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." The honesty was brutal, but it was also the first real thing my sister had ever said to me. For 33 years, we had played roles, the good daughter and the disappointment. Now, finally, we were having a real conversation. "Emma, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to keep pretending this is normal family dysfunction. What Mom has been doing to me, what you've been allowing her to do, it ends now." "What do you mean?" I stood up and walked to the window. looking out at my small yard with its simple flowers and Jake's truck in the driveway. This house that my mother considered inadequate suddenly felt like the most honest place in the world. I mean, I'm done being the family scapegoat. I'm done accepting crumbs of affection and being grateful for them. And I'm done protecting people who haven't been protecting me. Emma was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I turned back to face her, and for the first time in years, I felt completely clear about something. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes, and then I'm going to decide what to do about it. The look of fear that crossed Emma's face told me she understood this wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about justice. This was about finally holding people accountable for years of damage. And as I watched my sister realize that her confession had just changed everything between us forever, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. The power that comes from finally knowing the truth. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house smelled like turkey and betrayal. I sat at the same dining room table where I had eaten thousands of meals, but this time I wasn't the naive daughter hoping for scraps of approval. This time, I was watching everything with clear eyes. My mother had outdone herself with the decorations, orange and gold leaves scattered across the table, expensive candles flickering, the good china that would never be mine sparkling under the chandelier. Emma sat across from me looking uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes ever since her confession 2 weeks ago. "Before we eat," my mother announced, standing at the head of the table with her wine glass raised, "I want to say what I'm thankful for this year." My stomach clenched. I knew what was coming, but I still wasn't prepared for the impact. I'm thankful for my family, especially for the daughter who has always made me proud. Her eyes moved directly to Emma, her voice warm with genuine love. "Emma, you've given me so much joy over the years. Your success, your beautiful marriage, the way you carry yourself. You are everything a mother could hope for in a daughter." The silence stretched across the table like a knife. Uncle Bob shifted in his chair. Aunt Margaret stared at her plate. Jake's hand found mine under the table and squeezed so hard I almost gasped. But my mother wasn't finished. "It's so wonderful to have a child who appreciates everything she's been given, who makes smart choices, who understands the value of building a proper life." She smiled at Emma like she was the sun itself. "You've never disappointed me, sweetheart. Not once." The words hung in the air like poison. Not once. The implication was crystal clear to everyone at that table, unlike my other daughter, who disappoints me constantly. I felt something snap inside my chest, like a rubber band stretched too far. My face burned with shame and rage. My hands started shaking so badly I had to put down my water glass. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence. "What exactly are you thankful for about me?" She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. You know I love you." "That's not what I asked. You just spent 3 minutes telling everyone what you're thankful for about Emma. I want to know what you're thankful for about me." The entire table went dead quiet. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, could smell the cranberry sauce getting cold on the serving dish. "Well," my mother said, her voice getting that tight edge it always got when I pushed back, "I'm thankful that you found a profession that makes you happy." Found a profession. Not proud of my career saving lives, not grateful for my dedication to helping people. Just thankful that I found something that made me happy, like I was a child who finally learned to entertain herself. "And?" I pressed. "And what, Sarah? And what else are you thankful for about me? About my marriage to Jake? About the life I've built? About who I am as a person?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched so long that Uncle Bob started clearing his throat nervously. "Sarah, you're putting me on the spot," she finally said. "This isn't the time or place for this kind of conversation." "When is the time, Mom? When is it ever the time to talk about how you really feel about me?" My voice was getting louder, but I couldn't stop it. Because I've been waiting 33 years for you to look at me the way you just looked at Emma. Sarah, please, Emma whispered, but I ignored her. No, Emma, I'm done being quiet. I'm done pretending this is normal. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm done sitting at this table year after year, listening to Mom praise you while treating me like I'm some kind of consolation prize. My mother's face turned red. Sarah Marie, you are being completely inappropriate. We have guests. We have family, Mom, and family should be able to have honest conversations. I looked around the table at all these people who had watched this dynamic play out for years without saying a word. Tell me, Mom, when you talk to your friends about your daughters, what do you say about me? I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Emma told me about the group chat, about how you post pictures of her constantly but never mention me, about how you told Linda I was still figuring things out when she asked about me. My mother's eyes flew to Emma with a look of pure fury. Emma shrank back in her chair like she was 12 years old again. Emma had no right to share private conversations, my mother said, her voice ice cold. Private conversations? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you've been having private conversations about how disappointing I am for years. The only difference is now I finally know about them. You are being completely unreasonable. I have never said you were disappointing. You called me ungrateful at my own birthday party in front of everyone I care about. You made a video celebrating 25 years of family memories, and I appeared in 3 photos. You give Emma your grandmother's china because you don't think I'm worthy of family heirlooms. My voice cracked on the last words, but I pushed forward. And just now, at Thanksgiving dinner, you couldn't think of a single thing about me or my life that you're actually proud of. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see tears in Jake's eyes, could see Aunt Margaret staring at her hands, could see Uncle Bob looking like he wanted to disappear. But my mother just stood there, her face hard and cold, not denying a single thing I had said. Sarah, she said finally, her voice perfectly controlled. If that's how you choose to see things, then maybe you're right. Maybe you should spend your holidays elsewhere from now on. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I had just said, after laying my heart bare about years of pain and rejection, her response was to uninvite me from future family gatherings. I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, who was supposed to love me unconditionally, who had just proven that even when confronted with the truth about her behavior, she would rather lose me than change. You know what, Mom? You're right. Maybe I should. I walked out of that dining room with my head high and my heart breaking. Jake followed me immediately, grabbing our coats from the hall closet. Behind us, I could hear my mother saying something about dramatic personalities and making everything about herself. As we drove away from my childhood home, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The little girl inside me, who had spent 33 years trying to earn her mother's love, had finally died, and in her place was a woman who was ready to fight back. The video editing software on my laptop felt foreign under my fingers, but I had learned to use it over the past month. Jake sat beside me on our couch, watching as I pieced together 8 months of evidence into something that would change everything. Are you sure about this? He asked for the 10th time. I looked at the screen showing my mother's text messages, the audio recordings I had made discreetly at family gatherings, screenshots of Emma's deleted photos, all of it organized into a clear, undeniable timeline of systematic favoritism and emotional manipulation. I'm sure, I said, clicking save. I tried talking to her. I tried confronting her directly. She threw me out of Thanksgiving dinner rather than admit she was wrong. This is the only language she'll understand. The documentary was 12 minutes long. No dramatic music, no fancy effects, just facts. Screenshots of my mother's group chat messages calling me ungrateful and praising Emma. audio recordings of her telling Aunt Margaret that I settled for Jake. The comparison photos showing Emma's social media presence versus my complete absence. From family documentation, I titled it simply, "The Truth About Family Favoritism, My Mother's Own Words." Jake squeezed my shoulder as I uploaded it to Facebook, marking it as viewable by family and friends only. "Once you post this, there's no taking it back." "Good," I said, my finger hovering over the share button. "I don't want to take it back." Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Cousin Lisa commented, "Sarah, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Aunt Carol sent a private message. "Your mother owes you a massive apology." Uncle Bob called Jake directly, saying he was disgusted by what he had seen. But the real impact came 2 days later when my mother's friend Linda from the garden club called me. "Sarah, honey, I just saw your video. I feel sick about this." Her voice was shaky with emotion. "Your mother has been lying to us for years. She always said Emma was her only daughter when we talked about our kids." My chest tightened. "She said what?" "She would show us pictures of Emma and David, talk about Emma's achievements. But when anyone asked about you, she would change the subject or say she only had one daughter who turned out well. We thought something terrible had happened to you." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. My mother hadn't just been omitting me from conversations. She had been actively pretending I didn't exist. The next call came from Pastor Williams from my parents' church. "Sarah, I need you to know that several congregation members have reached out after seeing your video. Your mother has been accepting sympathy and prayers for years because she told us you were estranged from the family by choice." Estranged by choice. While I had been desperately trying to earn her approval, she was telling her church community that I had abandoned them. By the end of the week, my mother was experiencing something she had never faced before: social consequences. Her garden club friends started asking pointed questions. Church members began treating her coolly. Neighbors who had known our family for decades started looking at her differently. She called me Friday night, her voice tight with fury. "Sarah, you need to take that video down immediately. You're destroying my reputation over some silly family misunderstanding." "Silly misunderstanding?" I repeated. "Mom, you told your friends I didn't exist. You told your church I chose to be estranged from the family. You've been lying about me for years." "I never said those things. People are twisting my words, but I had learned to document everything now. I have recordings, Mom. I have screenshots. I have witnesses. Would you like me to make another video with even more evidence?" The silence on the other end told me she finally understood that I wasn't the same daughter who used to back down when she got angry. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to stop lying about me. I want you to treat me with the same respect you show Emma. And I want you to acknowledge that what you've been doing for years is wrong." "Fine. I'll think about what you've said." She hung up before I could respond. 3 days later, she posted on Facebook, "I'm planning a family reconciliation gathering at my home this Sunday. Sometimes families need to clear the air and move forward together." I stared at the post, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. A reconciliation gathering that she was controlling, at her house, on her terms. She was trying to manage the situation the same way she had managed me my entire life. But this time was different. This time, I held all the cards. I commented on her post. "I'll be happy to attend, Mom, as long as you're prepared to have an honest conversation about the patterns documented in my video. No more sweeping things under the rug." Her reply came an hour later. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll discuss everything openly." As I read her words, I realized she still didn't understand what had changed. She thought this was another situation she could smooth over with the right words and her practiced charm. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. The smell of my mother's famous apple pie filled the kitchen. but it couldn't mask the tension in the air. 8 months had passed since my birthday party disaster, and I stood in my own kitchen now, preparing dinner for the monthly gathering. I had started hosting at my house. My rules were simple. Everyone was welcome, but only if they could treat each other with respect. No comparisons, no put-downs, no favorites. Just family being family. The doorbell rang, and Jake answered it. Emma walked in first, looking nervous but genuine. Behind her came David, still humble from their financial struggles. They had learned what real support looked like when Jake and I helped them through their crisis without conditions or humiliation. "Sarah, thank you for having us," Emma said, hugging me tight. "The house smells incredible." Uncle Bob arrived next with Aunt Margaret, both of them warmer to me than they had ever been. The video had opened their eyes to things they had ignored for years, and they were making up for lost time. "Where should I put the salad?" Aunt Margaret asked, already moving to help in the kitchen like we were old friends. My mother was the last to arrive. She stood in my doorway looking uncertain, something I had never seen before. Over the past 8 months, she had slowly, grudgingly started accepting my boundaries. Not because she wanted to change, but because she had no choice. The social pressure from her friends and church had been relentless. When the truth came out about her lies, she lost her position on the church board. 2 of her closest friends from the garden club stopped speaking to her entirely. The perfect reputation she had built on my exclusion crumbled overnight. "Mom," I said, opening the door wider. "Come in." She stepped inside, looking around my living room like she was seeing it for the first time. The same living room she had dismissed as adequate for years now hosted the family gatherings she used to control. "Something smells wonderful," she said quietly. "Jake made his famous lasagna," I replied. "Your favorite." During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Emma talked about her new job, a more modest position, but one she actually enjoyed. David shared stories from his volunteer work at the community center, something he had started during their financial crisis. Uncle Bob told jokes that made everyone laugh. My mother participated, but carefully. Gone were the constant comparisons and subtle digs. She had learned through painful experience that her words now had consequences. "Sarah," she said as we were clearing dishes, "the lasagna really was delicious. Jake, you've become quite the cook." It was such a small thing, acknowledging Jake's skills without comparing them to someone else's or finding them lacking. But for us, it felt like progress. Later, as everyone was saying goodbye, my mother lingered. "Sarah, could I speak with you privately?" We stood on my front porch, the same porch where Emma had confessed her complicity months ago. My mother looked, older now, worn down by the consequences of her own actions. "I know I haven't said this properly before," she began, her voice softer than usual. "I know I hurt you. For years. I know I favored Emma, and I know I made you feel like you weren't. Enough." I waited, saying nothing. I had learned that silence was powerful. "I don't know how to fix it," she continued. "I don't know how to undo 33 years of what I did to you." "You can't undo it, Mom," I said finally. "But you can stop doing it going forward." "I'm trying," she whispered. "These dinners you host, they're good. You're good at bringing people together." It was the closest thing to a compliment about my abilities that she had ever given me. "I want to keep coming," she said. "If you'll have me." I looked at this woman who had shaped so much pain in my life, who was finally, slowly, learning to treat me like a human being deserving of respect. "You're always welcome, Mom, as long as you remember the rules." She nodded, understanding completely what I meant. After she left, Jake and I cleaned up the kitchen together, working in comfortable silence. "How do you feel?" he asked, loading the last plate into the dishwasher. I thought about it carefully. "I feel peaceful." For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for her approval anymore. I'm not hoping she'll suddenly see my worth. Because you finally see it yourself? Because I finally stopped needing her to see it. The truth was, I had won something much more valuable than my mother's approval. I had won my own self-respect. I had learned to set boundaries and enforce them. I had discovered that love without respect isn't really love at all. My mother would probably never be the warm, unconditionally loving parent I had dreamed of as a child. But she was learning to be respectful, and that was enough. Emma had become a real sister for the first time in our lives, honest about her mistakes and committed to doing better. Our relationship was built on truth now instead of competition. Jake looked at me with the same love he had always shown, but now I finally believed I deserved it. Standing in my kitchen, the kitchen my mother had once dismissed as too small, too simple, I realized I had everything I needed: a husband who saw my worth, a sister who was learning to be genuine, friends who valued me, and most importantly, a clear understanding of my own value. The family I had been born into had hurt me for decades, but the family I was building now, based on respect, honesty, and genuine care, was stronger than anything I had ever imagined possible. Some victories don't come from changing other people. They come from changing yourself and refusing to accept less than you deserve. I had finally learned the difference.